We all have a story to tell, and your story matters. Now more than ever, that's why we've created CINE Youth Fest, a cinema festival and a platform for independent voices, positive change, stories of heroism from the lens of a Latinx experience. Join the adventure on our website, cineyouthfest.org. There, you will find all you need to participate in the competition. The rules of the game, Latinx in film, where you find out how important we really are. Classes behind the camera with people who know. Stories from others like you who have a dream, big ideas, and awesome goals. Raise your voice to be heard. Show off to be seen. And be part of history sharing your story. Lights, camera, acción. Because tú cuentas. Powered by HITN.
I am so sorry we were late. I promise it had nothing to do with traffic. Well, maybe a little bit of internet traffic, pero está bien, estamos aquí. My name is Jessie Fuentes, and it is a privilege to be your moderator today. Welcome to the Conversation Among X, brought to you by Tu Cuenta CINE Youth Fest and powered by HITN. Today, we will discuss making the invisible visible, forging a vision of reality. As we discuss the invisibility of the industry, I want to remind our audience that our live series will lead up to our film festival that starts September 18th. I want to share with you all a way to make your next project visible with a very important audience, you. Submit your short film to CINE Youth Fest, which is dedicated to prioritizing the representation of Latinos in front and behind the lens. And let's not forget that you're going to be able to take home some money. CINE Youth Fest is officially open for submissions starting July 19th, and it's totally free for the first 2 weeks. Head over to our website, cineyouthfest.org, for info on guidelines and awards. I want to thank you all for joining us, and again, I want to apologize for our tardiness. We're going to have a very important conversation today. Before we meet our phenomenal panelists and watch their bio packages, let's take a look at mine.
Jessie Fuentes is an activist and educator in the Humboldt Park community in Chicago, Illinois. Popularly known as Paseo Boricua, Fuentes has participated in work empowering young people in the community, the campaign to release Oscar Lopez Rivera, anti-gentrification work, education reform, and for the independence of Puerto Rico. Fuentes is currently the Director of Policy at the Puerto Rican Cultural Center in Chicago. They strive to see a more just world through advocacy and policy.
You can help him. Just think of a way and ask yourself, what would Oscar say? Oscar would say he is a product of colonial aggression, that he has been beat up and made empty by the cycle of oppression. But our people need love. Our people have been raped, pushed over, and shoved, and it must stop. We must pick up our women, nurture our children, and show our youth there's no need to be afraid of the cops, you see. This is just another example of what this system has done to our people. And this system will continue if we can treat them like our equal. Que viva Puerto Rico libre.
Oh, they have a phenomenal way of making me look great, I must say. I want to be able to introduce our panelists. And first is PERLA. She is a photographer, has a permanent exhibit in the Smithsonian, but I'm going to let her bio package do her justice. Let's take a look.
Born in New York City and raised in Harlem, Perla de Leon is a photographer, author, videographer, producer, and editor. She has taught media classes to high school and college students and was a New York City Board of Education teacher and trainer in technology. Her photography work is in the permanent collection at the Smithsonian American Art Museum and New York's El Museo del Barrio and Gracie Mansion. Currently, she is working on Chapel of Gratitude, a 12-feet triptych installation that incorporates photography, stained glass, maps, narratives together with dancers, musicians, flower beds, and poets. Her work in the past 4 years honors and celebrates the United Nations International Decade for the People of African Descent.
PERLA, let's meet PERLA live. How are you?
Oh, wonderful to be here with you today.
It is such a privilege to share space with you. Permanent exhibits and amazing 3 spaces. How does that feel?
It feels great because I'm from the generation of women that we didn't get a chance to exhibit very much. And in the last 6 years, more or less, I've managed to be in quite a few museums and permanent collections. So it's just wonderful. And to be able to share time with young people, with all this great movement that's happening, though they came from sad circumstances.
Yes.
I think we're going to do some great things.
We are. We're going to have a deeper conversation as we get into the conversation. And I want to introduce our next panelist, RICO PABON, an MC from the Bay Area. He has shared stages with some amazing people, but let's check out his bio package.
RICO PABON is an MC whose artistry and activism are one and the same, with poetic lyrics bound by the theme that life is worth living for, using truth and love as weapons. This theme, combined with his rhythmic delivery, makes him one of the Bay Area's most dynamic MCs. He has shared the stage with other international artists such as Damien and Stephen Marley, Ozomatli, Buju Banton, Femi Kuti, Zap Mama, Michelle Ndego Ocello, Maxi Priest, Sizzla, to name a few, and has also performed with hip-hop icons such as Run DMC, Wu-Tang Clan, The Fugees, Dead Prez, Big Daddy Kane, and Curtis Blow. Rico is also a great chef who created the legendary Sofrito, the first Puerto Rican cuisine restaurant in the Bay Area.
One of the miracles, under God indivisible, inexplicable, lyrical, mystical individuals. No mimics and gimmicks, I spit it acidic and visual. Mythical rhythm, kill 'em in many venomous intervals. Unequivocal, ill as Attila, gorilla, thriller, Manila. My cerebellum antenna connection clear as a mirror.
Rico, let's take a look at you. How are you?
I'm feeling blessed, and so happy to be here. Thank you.
Performer with Run DMC, Dead Prez. I mean, and you're bringing all that Boricua presence to hip hop. That's dope.
The Boricua presence, as everybody knows, has been there since the birth. So I just feel just honored to be one of the many little candles that just hold it, you know, and keep it lit for the next generation. So yeah, it's an honor and a privilege to be here and just to be a hip hop artist.
Awesome. It is also a pleasure to be sharing space with you, Rico. I've been listening to your stuff since I was like 17 years old. And so I'm super hyped to have this conversation with you. Yes,
serious.
but we're going to have a deeper conversation in a second. I'm super glad to see you. I want to introduce our next panelist, Rosa Gutierrez, a filmmaker and a sociologist, both fields that truly can take you from being invisible to visible. Let's take a look at her bio package.
Rosa Emmanuelli Gutierrez is a Puerto Rican filmmaker and sociologist. She is the co-writer and creative and impact producer of the feature-length documentary Huracan, Nation in Resistance, about the historical struggle of Puerto Rico. Through Huracan's impact campaign, Rosa denounced the effects of colonialism in Puerto Rico, reiterated the importance of history and of becoming active members of history, meeting and having dialogue with the public in Puerto Rico and the United States, inspired Rosa's 2 new documentaries currently in production. She is working on movies rooted in collaboration and history that entertain, visibilize, and uplift.
Rosa, how are you?
Hi, Jessie. Nice to see you again. I'm so excited to be here. Honored to be among these amazing artists and activists.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great. Rosa, quickly tell me, did you study film and sociology at the same time?
No. I studied sociology, and I became involved in filmmaking in university while making Huracan. But that's a whole nother story, you know.
Yes.
It's not what I studied.
Yes, no, we'll have a deep conversation about how you took that journey in just a second. But let me introduce our last panelist, actor, photographer, videographer, executive director of an urban theater company here in Chicago, Ivan Vega. Let's take a look at his bio package.
Ivan Vega is a husband, a father of 2 boys. Ivan is also an actor, photographer, producer, and co-founder and executive director of Urban Theater Company, which turned 16 in May. Ivan also works with the Puerto Rican Cultural Center as a program manager for Safe Passage, an initiative that makes sure Chicago public school students have a safe route to and from school. His overall work is deeply rooted in serving the Humboldt Park community. As an actor, some of Ivan's recent TV credits include Proven Innocent, Chicago PD, Chicago Fire, and The Chi.
Ivan, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Happy to be here with you, everyone.
That's awesome. You have done a ton of work, and we're going to have a very deep conversation soon. But let's bring in all of our panelists so that we can begin the important conversation. Today, I want to remind our audience that we are having a conversation on making the invisible visible, forging a vision of reality. All folks in the industry where they often can feel invisible, where systems can cause that type of feeling. And we're going to talk about the work that each one of these individuals are doing in their industry to change the dynamic. Many Latinx artists speak of the invisibility they feel in their industry, and I'm sure that you all have felt it. What aspects of invisibility have you seen or experienced as Latin artists? Rico, let's start with you, right? You're an MC. You're probably the only MC here, unless anyone has that hidden talent that's not in their bio package. Rico, let's talk about that invisibility.
Sure. Well, I was going to say, you know, Pirito Mas would say every child is born a poet. So I bet there's probably more than one MC here in the group. You know, when I think of invisibility in terms of being a Latino artist, what comes to mind is the experience of releasing an album. Now it's been quite a few years. The album was called Louder Than Fiction, and I got a good write-up, what I thought was going to be a good write-up in one of the local papers by one of the well-known hip-hop writers. And it was something to the effect of RICO PABON has released the dopest hip-hop album by a Boricua from the Bay, or maybe it's only the only one, right? Or something. And it was like, wow, that's kind of like when I playfully tell my mother, you're the best mother I've ever had, right? Like I wasn't sure if it was a compliment to me or not. And so, yeah, the feeling of having to be considered as an MC, a Latino MC, as opposed to just an MC who happens to be a Latino, Afro-Latino, Boricua, however you want to, you know, put whatever box you want to put me in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ivan?
Yeah. So to chime in, I mean, in places that I felt invisibility or being invisible is through the arts specifically, right? As an actor, being pigeonholed and stereotyped, not given, being given as many opportunities as others, equality in funding, because the fact is that the money doesn't get distributed around equally. So we have to fight much harder for that funding, and we have to make sure that we fight a lot harder to be seen and be heard.
Absolutely, and funding is something that all artists struggle with, right? Rosa, you put together Huracan, which got 100 different sessions of being able to have opportunities to view that film. It really was a national presence, right? Really talking about the resiliency of Puerto Rico. Talk to us about the invisibility maybe that you felt even in creating something so dynamic.
Well, Jessie, let me tell you that we had all those screenings of Huracan, more than 100 screenings in 49 towns and cities in Puerto Rico and in the United States. But it was only because of the support that we had when we first screened Huracan, and so many teachers and community organizers saw it, and they wanted to show it at their own communities, schools, and universities, and that's how we were able to distribute it so well. It was because people craved it. Puerto Ricanos craved it. It wasn't because they were a platform where we were able to do that. We had to organize it. It was also, it was an alternative form of distribution, but it was thanks to the support of Puerto Ricanos and how I think we yearn so much for content that speaks to us because we have been invisibilized. And when distributing Huracan, it was so apparent that there's a need, for more content that comes from us and that speaks to us. And so I think that's what really shocked me about the invisibilization, because that's how so much people want it so much. And that's how Huracan moved around.
Yeah, and it moved around quite a bit, right? And I mean, Boricuas in Chicago specifically were floored to be able to see such a film piece that spoke to our lived experience. As colonial beings, we don't see pieces that speak to our reality often. And so thank you for that, Rosa. Perla, you have permanent exhibits that speak to a Latinx experience. Talk about some experiences that you've had along your journey that in moments where you felt invisible, maybe even your work felt invisible as a Latina artist.
Well, when I began, really all women pretty much were invisible. If you know the Guerrilla Girls from New York, they used to put out these statistics that said only barely 1% of women were exhibited at major museums, and minority artists were less than white women. So my generation, I'm a bit older than the rest of you, we were kind of generations that were looking for any little gallery that either a woman would put together to exhibit women artists, or African American for African American artists, and Latino for Latino artists, which is how El Museo del Barrio and the Studio Museum in Harlem pretty much got started. So my generation, we didn't see much of anything, but it was wonderful to see how we did our best to, start theaters, start just about anything we could to be visible. As someone who grew up with a mom that loved movies, I also hated the way we were represented, especially someone who would be a person really an Afro-Latino. They didn't exist, whether it was the news or it was a movie. And so as much as there's been a lot of invisibility, it's also wonderful to see that we now have a lot of places that we can exhibit.
Absolutely. And it's a pleasure to witness all of your work, right? And I followed all of you all in a different way, and I've always had the privilege of seeing myself through your work. And so that, again, I'm super honored to be here with all of you today. You guys are all artists because of that invisibility and the need, right, to articulate that invisibility through the work for the greater generation. To what degree is this sense of invisibility, yours or others, siblings, parents, friends, different communities, reflected in your work? Let's talk about your work. Rosa, why don't you start us off?
Okay, no problem. So how the sense of invisibility is in my work. I definitely think that it is there because while making Huracan, it was because of this lack of understanding of our own history. And that comes from the invisibilization of our own history. And so making the film was a journey through our history, through learning through the different perspectives of other people. And I think I learned a lot throughout it because I didn't learn much of it during high school. But when showing the film, I remember this law student, okay, in Puerto Rico, that told me that after watching Huracan, he saw that he learned more by watching it than through decades of history classes in school, and that was shocking to me. But at the same time, I understand it, and that's why my focus in filmmaking is to really, it's rooted in collaboration and our own history, so that it can entertain, visibilize, and uplift. And our communities are marginalized, and we need to show that, because show our communities, show our idiosyncrasies, our culture, our way of life, our dreams, our hopes, you know. And I think that's very important, and that's something that I really want. I am very conscious of putting into my work.
Yeah. Rosa, what you're saying really resonates and what you said before, because it's the most important part about theater is making sure that our youth see faces that look like them. They see black and brown faces on stage. You don't know how many times you've gone to see a play or to see a show, and it's like, yeah, it's good, but I can't relate to that because I don't see my people. Those stories are completely different from ours. And when we started, it was an opportunity to make sure that we showcase the Puerto Rican experience in Chicago. Because, you know, I love my Mexican community. I grew up in La Villita, but it's very Mexican centric. So that's where we stepped in to make sure that not only that we tell stories that our community can relate to, but we can showcase our food, our culture, our music, our community. And that's really the most important thing. I mean, that's how you create visibility right there, is to really encompass that completely and make sure that what people are seeing, that they can see themselves reflected.
Absolutely. Bella, why don't you tell us about your work?
Well, Ivan, my cousin worked with Miriam Colon in New York, working in Spanish and in English, which I thought was fascinating to see one day the film in one language and then how different it was in the second language, which was beautiful. So I always had a strong affinity to theater, but as a film person, I was very upset that, though I'm not a journalist, that all the news about the Bronx and the fires and everything that happened in the late 70s through the 80s, it wasn't a matter of invisibility. It was a matter of visibility that was so negative. Blaming people for the fires, blaming people for making New York a terrible place. It was always blaming Black and brown people, which was the Puerto Rican and African American for the most part, of every awful thing you can think of. And I was teaching photography, pinhole photography with some children, part of a grant, and I would watch the children play in what looked like a war zone. And I felt that I needed to tell their story because they were just wonderful. These kids who, in the midst of this horrific war zone, this is what it was, that's when they started with hip hop and great salsa and dancing and played football with one little ball because there was no programs in the schools. My focus was, if we're going to see them, we need to see them in ways other than what the media is showing them, which has improved a bit, but it was really absolutely awful back then.
And it's kind of it's the same thing here in Humboldt Park, right? Humboldt Park gets visibility, and thankfully recently it's been extremely positive. But there's certain journalists that always pick up on the negative things in the community, and that's what they showcase, and that's what people think of our community. So it's important for us to step forward and make sure that we highlight all that positiveness and success that's happening amongst our organizations.
That's right. That's right. You know, Perla, I wanted, when you started speaking, you originally, and you said you made a reference to being from that generation, you know, before ours. And I just want to acknowledge that when you started speaking too, I was reminded so much of Aurora Levins Morales, who is also just, who I've learned so much from. And she let me sit in on one of her classes. She was teaching a Puerto Rican history class at UC Berkeley. I was not a UC Berkeley student. I was a high school graduate by the skin of my teeth person. And she let me sit in on her class anyway. And I did every assignment like as if I was getting credit for it. But to be honest with you, when I signed up, it was Puerto Rican history from a woman's perspective. And at that age, I was like, felt let down. I was like, dang, why does it have to be, I just want to learn Puerto Rican history, right? And within the first day of being in Aurora's class and reading the things that she had written, she completely changed my perspective. And I realized that our true history as Boricuas, as colonized people, had been hidden from us. And the reason why it had been hidden, well, I wouldn't say the reason, but one of the reasons why it's hard for us to get a clear understanding of our history is because the woman's story has yet to be told. The women who have held together our societies throughout times of slavery and colonization, the women who have made sure that our culture stays intact, that traditions get passed on, instead of the stories of who was being colonized and stories of wars and who was ruling. So I want to just thank you for being also that person, that light that makes sure that we continue to tell the stories that are hidden behind, under like cold blankets of time, but on purpose. And something that you said, Rosa, too, it made me think, the way that law student, you said, the way that they were affected. I feel like all of the artists here, we almost, in a way, we sort of contradict that quote that says that art is like a hammer, because though we change things, a hammer changes things from the outside in, and it's very hard. And artists, we change things and people from the inside out, and we do it delicately over time. And we're more like a wall. We're more like a waterfall than we are like a wall.
Yes,
we change with time and consistency, and it happens. We meet people where they are. So yeah,
absolutely.
That's what doing, so what a beautiful panel right here. Thank you.
Rico, you're drawing points that are great for the next topic. But before we get there, I think what's really important to draw here is that you all tell the counter narrative, right? And Rico, you alluded to it. Perla, you alluded to it. Rosa, you did the same. So did Ivan. When we watch film, when we see images, or you turn on the news, that's all you got to do, actually. Is just turn on the news every morning. The images that we see of ourselves are ones that are produced from a Eurocentric and very male-centric lens, right? Not telling the true story of who we are, where we come from. And you all, in your very unique ways, have been able to tell the stories so beautifully, right? And that's why you were invited here today, because you guys have contributed to making the invisible visible. But we need to share out, right? And that's the part of our job. And Ivan says it, he's quoted in his bio package, we need to be responsible for mentoring others, specifically young people, right? Giving advice to artists and industry leaders. What do you think it will take to make the invisible visible in the film and TV industry? Rosa, what do you think?
Well, I definitely think that we need people, like our people from the Americas. When I say people from the Americas, I don't say Latinx, because I think, what is Latinx? In the United States, I understand it, but still it invisibilizes indigenous people from the Americas and Afro-descendant people. And so I'm going to speak, from the Americas, people from the Americas. And I think there needs to be more people like us behind the cameras telling the stories. Our perspectives need to be told. But I think we have a responsibility to tell those stories, but also in collaboration with people from those communities. I think it's, we don't want to reproduce the same colonial structures by coming and telling the story about the community from Lajas, for example. I don't know. And we need to work in collaboration. That's what I'm focusing on right now. The films that I'm working on, they came as inspiration from dialogue when we screened Huracan. And it's like, what do you think about it? Like the constructive criticism, but what do you want to see? Like, and people told us, like, what are other people doing in other communities? And that's how my content is coming up. It's from dialogue and collaboration with others. And so it's something that is it's ours more than mine. And I think it's very important to, in a way, it's a way to open up doors for others from the Americas. It's to collaborate in a way. You can open doors in the industry, yes, but if you collaborate, then you're opening up so much more space, and the stories are gonna be so much richer, I think, when there are many different perspectives in the storytelling and in direction and in the actors as well.
Absolutely, Rosa. Bella, what do you think it will take to make the invisible visible in film and in TV?
I personally feel that we need to, at every juncture, we need to tell them how much we spend. Latinos spend, I forget how many billions it is now, but we spend X amount of billions on movies, on merchandise. You could probably throw in their cable now that everything is streaming. And when you have an audience that is that huge, and yet you have no projects by those studios that are written, produced, and directed by Latinos, that's a huge issue. That is a very huge issue. African Americans, often colleagues that are doing film, will quote all of the statistics, which goes back also to the Guerrilla Girls I was talking about. When you have those numbers and you shame people into, we're not even 1/2 of 1% being represented, and yet look at the billions that we bring to your movie houses, that has to bring you to the table, because sadly, money talks. But I totally agree with what Rosa is saying, because I had the honor of photographing the lynching memorial in Montgomery, Alabama, which absolutely changed my life. But as a very white woman, I felt that the projects that I'm doing now on slavery in New York, I cannot work by myself. I have to work with African Americans, with Afro-Latinos, in every way, even if the concept was mine, because it's an art installation that I just felt was needed by all races. So I'm hoping that all of us will take part and it will be beneficial. I'm also working with a descendant of Georgetown University. They sold her family so that Georgetown University wouldn't go bankrupt. And I'm going to produce a piece of hers in New York. So I'm going towards stage, something that I've never done before, only because I want to collaborate with an African American woman who I think is spectacular.
Absolutely. RICO?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I was just going to bounce off of what Perla was saying, that I think it's important for, as consumers, we vote with our dollars, right? So it does matter what movies we go see and what forms of art we support. I think it's hard for many people to just grasp the power of one. So, I've heard it, also when thinking of marches or rallies, and people say, well, what is one body going to do? Well, for an independent artist, it does a lot when you support them. So I would say, as consumers, you vote with your dollars, not just where you spend them, meaning if you support an independent artist, but if you're going to see that movie, or if you're buying that music, or passing on that piece of art that depicts us in a negative light, that's also voting. That's also being political. People say I'm not political. You are political by what you support, by what you click on, and what you share. So that's, as consumers. I think as creators, we have to commit to telling the stories and let go of this idea that I feel like has been told for generations of like, oh, get yourself a platform first, and then you can start telling your people's real stories, right? So, do what the industry expects you to do, get popular, and then somehow turn your whole, thing around and become sort of a voice for the voiceless, as it were. We need to abandon that and commit to telling the multi-layered versions of our, stories of our people. They're multi-layered. And so if we can commit to that, I think that will say so much, because the industry won't have a choice but to bend to us, right? We won't have to bend to them. They bend to us. So, but it takes unity, right? It takes many of us to commit to doing it.
Yeah, Rico, you touched on a lot of points that I believe in, and it's something a friend in Chicago, as a producer, says, right? If you don't support the work in the community, the theaters in the community, then you will lose it. If you don't support the businesses in your community, then what's going to happen? So we have to be intentional about where we put our money, but support. If one person wins, we all win, and I think Chicago has that mindset, right? It's not so like cutthroat. Like, it's about like bringing people up. If I succeed, I'm going to bring that next young person up. Mentorship, extremely important, because I was never mentored, right? I didn't know what a mentor was till I was in college. Now I was mentored, but now any chance I get, I want to work with the youth. I want to work with a young person because I can also learn from them, and I want to help them out as much as I can because I want to invest in our community. Like, who else is going to do that? So it's a responsibility that we have. Take the blinders off and really just focus and intersect. Like Rosa was saying, collaborate with your organizations in your community, collaborate with your schools. It's not only about the work that you're doing, but how do we work together, right? There's power in numbers. And if we do things together, if we collaborate, we can continue to push forward and shine.
Yeah, no, this is beautiful, right? Because there's themes that are coming out, and Rico, you said it in a way that, it's like you should coin it so people don't take it from you. We don't bend to them, they should bend to us, right? Not waiting for the breaking part of our careers, but being honest with who we are as we enter the industry, I think is what's most important, right? Staying true to who we are, our identities, and where we come from, and being able to combat the invisibility. In fact, to break that barrier with being brave enough to tell our story without shying away because of the Eurocentric lens that often muzzles us, right? Like, we're often muzzled by that Eurocentric, male-centric lens that dominates the industry. And you all have consciously chosen to break away with that, right? Tomorrow. Go ahead, Rico.
I was gonna say, that's another thing. If I could share with, like some aspiring, artists, is there's so many positions within these industries that we're talking about, right? There's the business, the multi-layered business side too. So I would encourage people to explore all of the aspects, because you know, to have a multitude of artists is awesome, but we need a multitude of business people. We need a multitude of entertainment lawyers to be able to represent us fairly. So when we talk about the industry, it's like, how beautiful would it be to build our own industry where we're not worried about their studios or their museums or their producers or their funding, right? Or their record labels, where I am, where it's us, we do it. So that's another thing. Let's do all of those things. Let's build for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no doubt.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to remind audiences that are tuning in late, you are watching a series, a discussion on making the invisible visible, forging a vision of reality, conversations among X, brought to you by Tu Cuenta Cine Youth Fest, powered by HITN. Rosa, you were going to chime in quickly.
Yes, I was gonna add on that our people want to see our stories. You know, they want this content, so they will buy it, they will go see it because they need it. And so we just need to keep making it. I know that there are so many artists like us out there, independent artists that are making beautiful and socially conscious different art forms. And like you said, Rico, we need platforms. We need support from people so that we are making already our art, but how do we show it? How do we distribute it? And when I made Huracan, we found an alternative way to distribute it, because if not, it was not gonna move, you know. But if we need to work on this, you know. And I know that there are many talented people that can do this, but we need to, I don't know, maybe leave that a little bit, the industry, and start creating our own spaces so that we can showcase our art, so that our people can actually see it. Because there are so many films made by people from the Americas. There are so many different painters, MCs, you know, there are many different artists. And so
Absolutely.
how are people able to watch that content? That's what we need to figure out.
Absolutely. Let's talk about watching content. Tomorrow, In the Heights is going mainstream. Many of us were able to see that play in our cities on stage, and tomorrow it hits the theaters. Some of us were able to watch the premiere. A film that articulates the Puerto Rican experience in New York, the Latinx experience in New York, and really what a community of Latin identity looks like, and telling the counter narrative. Again, because if you turn on the news and see what's portrayed on Latinos and Latinas from New York, it's a very different portrayal, a very different image that's depicted than what we are going to see in theaters In the Heights tomorrow. And I'm predicting that we're about to rock the Oscars, so I'm all ready. Sure. But talk to me about how we're feeling about a film like In the Heights about to hit theaters tomorrow. Ivan?
Can I go? Yeah. I mean, I was one of those who saw a screening when it was here in Chicago. And look, I got to say, when In the Heights came out, like, it was the first time that I was like, wow, this play, they're speaking my story. It's an experience that I lived. It's familiar to me, the music. And the film to me spoke in a completely different way than the stage production, because when you look at it and how beautiful it is to see all these Latinos represented on that screen. And of course, the budget is so much bigger, and a lot of young filmmakers don't have access to that. But it's a step to make sure that, wow, like, we can see ourselves. So you're going to inspire so many youth that are going to see that film and be like, oh, it's possible for me to do that, to be a dancer, to be a writer, to be a filmmaker. So I love it, right? I'm a theater nerd. I'm a musical theater nerd. But we need more writers like that to continue to tell our stories and to take it to that level. We can start community. But again, it's that mentorship. How do we pull on each other and find those producers and find those people and say, you know what, I'm going to give you money because I believe in you and it's my responsibility. It's like, stop the BS already. It's like, you have a responsibility now. Now let's get to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Rosa, what about you?
Like Ivan says, I think it's very important that we keep watching content that comes from us and that is about our stories, no matter where you're from, ¿verdad? Boricua, aunque naciera en la luna. Entonces, I think that we need to keep uplifting other people so that more content by us gets to the mainstream media, because what In the Heights is gonna do is gonna be able to access so much public, and something that is not accessible to the majority of Latinx artists. So I think we need to find ways to get up there, because there are so many other narratives and perspectives that also should be showcased and get that distribution that In the Heights is gonna get. And so that's really exciting that a movie like that can get that spot.
No, absolutely. Rico?
I know nothing about it, right? But I know for me, being way out here on the West Coast, I've been out here for many, many, many years, and still people don't know what a Boricua is. So now I feel like at least after the movie, I'm gonna have to do less explaining, so I'm always excited. I'm good, definitely gonna, for me, I'm a father of 3. I have a 14-year-old, 11, and an 8-year-old. So it's everything that we're talking about, it took on another meaning when I became a father. The images that are portrayed, and I remember even my middle child, my daughter, watching her cartoons, right, and then wanting to put a blonde wig on and things like that. And this is my daughter who she told us from when she was a baby, I love you all, but I love myself a little bit more. But the effect, the power of the media, and this is from a conscious family who limited their screen time and all of that. It was so powerful. So it became very real. So I'm very curious about it. I'm gonna but I gotta screen it before I let my kids see it.
Yes, I mean, in the next few months, we're gonna see In the Heights take up many screens in theaters and at homes. And In the Heights is something that really portrays the joys and the culture of being Latino, right? Of what it means to be on a block where you can hear music and dance, and you have your corner barrio store, and all the nuances that make our homes communities, right? And then we have West Side Story, that's going to come out in December, that portrays a very different narrative, the reality of gangs and racism in our communities, but from our lens, right? Not from that Eurocentric lens that dominates our media. I'm super excited of what it's going to mean to be able to tell our story from that perspective. Perla, what are your thoughts on what cinema is going to take on for our communities?
I think it's amazing that they're both coming out pretty much the same year. When you think of what Rita Moreno has meant to us for so many decades and for so many generations because of West Side Story, and to see that now it's going to be, like you're saying, it's going to be from the lens not of totally of the gangs, and it just was, as a New Yorker, I remember being upset when I saw it. As much as I danced and I loved it, I also was upset. And I can't imagine the new version being that way. So to have both of them the same year, I think we should invite your neighbors, invite your friends, anyone you're mentoring, go as a group and support it so that it's a super hit, both of them. Because if it's a good hit and not just waiting until it streams later, that's how they get financing for other films. So it's very important to those of us that are ready to go back to the movies, to really try and take a group with you and just enjoy it in the big screen.
Absolutely. No, and that's great advice, Bella, because it's super important for us to be able to watch these films and digest them with family and friends, to have critical conversations about the narratives that are being portrayed in the films, from whose lens and who does it serve. And we're going to be as critical, right? With In the Heights and West Side Story, because it's important for us to be able to be honest and transparent with that narrative, and also affirming that we are making mainstream television, right? But ensuring that we remain critical in that process, right? That's what being in community is all about. That is what you all have done as photographers, videographers, directors, MCs. You all have been able to take what is said about us, whether it is in a lens that we appreciate or not, and tell the narrative from a just position that truly allows people to fully understand our identities and positions, right? And that's super important. And I appreciate all of you all for the very eloquent and unapologetic ways that you all do that, right? We have a few minutes left, and I want you all to share any final thoughts before we close out our episode today. Rosa.
Yeah, I would like to say that I think it's very important that we, when we're making art, that we don't reproduce what is already being made in the mainstream or from Hollywood. I think it's very important to look within and contextualize ourselves and our history, our environment, our culture, and take a look from that and create new things, and not falling into the same narratives that have been imposed on us, but to really take from our idiosyncrasy, from our perspectives, and create new content, and from our visions, not from others' look of what we should be.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And you know, Jessie, I've had a moment since I'm here in this space where you were at when you were younger and when you started. And this space it's, you know, I always say it's a sacred space because there's so much work that has come out of what it is. You see the sign right there. It says Bate Urbano. There's importance in preserving legacy, in preserving space, and the work that has been done here for so many years. And we have that weight on our shoulders because we make sure that the work that comes out of this space connects to our community, that speaks to those young people that are down the street that can say like, oh man, that's for me. I want to get involved because there's an opportunity for work. And young people out there, you know, that you're listening, like, get to know your organizations. You know, if you want to work or get involved, just stop on in, because I have an open door policy. And if you come in and you want to learn, I will take you on. I may not have the time, but I will find time, because that's my commitment, because I was that age. So yeah, I'm just inspired by this conversation. I'm inspired by Jessie and you know, how you've grown and the work that you're doing, and everyone else that's here. So thank you.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I feel honored to be here amongst y'all. Jessie, I wanted to tell one 15-second story about the one time I visited Humboldt Park. I was invited to perform at the Puerto Rican Day Parade out there, and I bought myself a Malta, and I was walking through the crowd, and a police officer stopped me, and he basically took my Malta. He said it was an alcoholic beverage, and a crowd of young people surrounded us, and they were like, "No, that's just like a soda," and they got on him. But he didn't give me my Malta back. But when I got on the stage, I said, "Yeah, that guy right there took my Malta," and the whole audience just boo, 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 boo. And so I love Humboldt Park. And the reason why that's relevant is because that's what we need to do always. We need to like surround our people when one of us releases a piece of art, recognize it as like a gift. I don't mean in a corny way, like a gift from the creator, because not everyone is an artist, right? Only few of us. So we should just recognize the gift that are given to us by the artists and surround them and stand up for them, right? Share their art, share our art like we share those other folks' art that we also appreciate. You know what I mean? So yeah, don't forget the Malta story when you create.
I'm gonna write that into. We gotta add that into one of our plays.
Absolutely. Bella, any final thoughts specifically for young people that want to go into the industry?
Well, I was a teacher for more than 30 years and a teacher trainer as well in photography and technology. So mentoring for me is an ongoing thing. When Decade of Fire, I have some photographs in that film. when that was screened, I had someone come up to me and say, "Oh, I wish I had known you when you were teaching so that I could take your class." I said, "No, that's fine. You just have to call me and tell me your schedule and we'll figure something out." And so she's worked with me on and off. And even during the pandemic, I stay in touch to make sure, are you okay? Look into this, look into that. I have a young man in Texas. He used to be at NYU. We're always communicating. Look into this. This looks like something that might interest you. So mentoring is really important. And sometimes they're not even with you, but they bounce off their ideas because they don't have other people. I didn't have mentors. And I would have loved an aunt or an uncle or someone who said, "Well, did you think of volunteering here? And then you'll know what the business is like. And if you like it, you might get hired." And just that little statement of telling folks, yeah, it's hard. You're going to have to then possibly have 2 jobs. But make sure you look into what passion you have.
Yeah.
At least
Absolutely.
a couple of weeks. And then, stay with people who will encourage whatever it is you want to do.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's been a beautiful conversation, and I want to thank all of you for giving your time, sharing your lived experiences as leaders and artists in the industry, and for giving advice, right? For being on this platform and inspiring young people, right? And that's what Tu Cuenta Cine Youth Fest is all about. I want to remind people that we are here to have conversations with artists so that you all can have a lens into the expertise of Latino artists who can share your experience and share the advice. We are super excited for our next episode. It is going to be June 30th, held by my co-host Lorena. They have phenomenal artists coming on. It's going to be about film festivals and Latinx filmmakers. I also want to encourage, again, one more time, we are leading up to a film festival that starts September 18th. It is not too late to break the invisibility by making your project visible. We begin to accept submissions July 19th. You can also take home money, but you can also win awards. Visit cineyouthfest.org to get more details on the guidelines and the awards. I want to thank everybody again. I am Jessie Fuentes. It has been a privilege to be your moderator. Let's take a look at the sponsors to make it all possible.
Thanks to our sponsors, we continue to have important conversations that educate and inspire the most valuable asset for a brighter future, the new generation of Latinx creatives. Visit cineyouthfest.org to find out more, because tú cuentas. We all have a story to tell, and your story matters. Now more than ever, that's why we've created Cine Youth Fest, a cinema festival and a platform for independent voices, positive change, stories of heroism from the lens of a Latinx experience. Join the adventure on our website, cineyouthfest.org. There, you will find all you need to participate in the competition. The rules of the game, Latinx in film, where you find out how important we really are. Classes behind the camera with people who know. Stories from others like you who have a dream, big ideas, and awesome goals. Raise your voice to be heard. Show off to be seen. And be part of history sharing your story. Lights, camera, acción. Because tú cuentas. Powered by HITN.
I want to let everybody know, if you have questions, email us at tccyf@hitn.org.
Thanks to our sponsors, we continue to have important conversations that educate and inspire the most valuable asset for a brighter future, the new generation of Latinx creatives. Visit cineyouthfest.org to find out more, because tú cuentas.
you.